Hey everybody, I'm Jesse, producer of the No Quitting the Home Team podcast. I wanted to give a quick disclaimer in that while we hope anyone who listens would gain wisdom and insight from Dave and Renee's conversations, this is still a podcast intended for married couples, and to that end there will occasionally be dialogue around sexual intimacy and other related topics. So, for those of you who may be single and particularly sensitive to this subject matter, or those who may be listening at home or in the car with their kids around, we wanted to give you a heads up in advance so that you might continue listening at your own discretion.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to No Quitting the Home Team, a summer podcast on marriage.
Can't say summer.
Well, I know, but we have to.
Ooh, busted.
Oh, let's do
I
it. Just say a podcast.
We have to confess we're recording 2 episodes in one day.
Yeah.
So the earlier introduction still applies.
Gotta re-record.
No. It still is the Thursday before Labor
Pay
Day.
no mind to the man behind the curtain.
But I'm Renee still.
I'm Dave.
I'm Jesse.
Hey, it's no secret for anyone that we, as a society, are still in the throes of a pretty significant cultural shift. People are thinking, believing different things that have been fundamental to their sort of self-understanding, whether it's their faith, their gender, their sexuality, their national identity. A lot of things seem to be shifting right now for a lot of people. So the question we're going to deal with today on the show is what happens when those cultural divisions that are experienced in society at large, what happens when they show up in your home?
And the person you married isn't the person you're married to.
What happens if all of a sudden who you're married to is just different? And when is there a time when you want to quit the home team? And when if it's ever appropriate.
What's the title of this podcast?
No quitting the home team.
Oh, tension.
So some light subject matter today.
Yes.
Yes, we're going to talk about the D.
But before that, we're going to talk about our fight. So we were coming to record, and we actually arrived at the studio before Jesse did. He was finishing a lunch. And so we're sitting here preparing to record 2 podcasts.
Wait. Dave texted me when I said, hey, sorry I'm running a little late, I'm on my way. He goes, it's okay, we're just sitting on the sofa in the green room fighting. And I thought he was joking. So,
No,
not
I
joking.
jokingly replied, oh, hey, make sure you save it for the pod.
And we're like, done.
Oh,
We will.
boy.
No,
man.
we were
now
fighting.
I'm stuck here. Okay, all right. Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's go.
So, yeah, we're waiting to start the podcast. And then Renee says...
Well, I think what our fight was about opens the discussion to what some things a lot of couples deal with in fights. So I thought it'd be worth delving into.
And it answers the question that we always ask, how are we doing?
Right.
And right now we're fighting about
So,
this.
hey, I was going to say, so should I ask you?
Yeah.
Well, I think
hey.
we came to a good resolution. Do you? Or no?
I think so.
Yeah.
So, but the question you asked, or it's more of an activity that you suggested that we do.
All I said was, hey, we need, in the next couple of days or weeks, we need to clean out your desk because it's really cluttered.
Right. My desk.
Yeah. At home in our basement.
Yeah.
That's what I said.
Yeah. And then how did I respond to that?
Well, you can
Very well, I would guess.
say how you responded.
Well, first of all, I responded by saying, I think my desk is pretty organized.
And then I just pointed out all the ways his desk is not organized. And I did say, I see some familial tendencies in you that scare me, that I don't want to be our reality, which is where it went south.
Right. Brought up the old family of origin question.
Yep.
And then you were like, for my emotional health, I cannot have this in my house.
I just said I cannot, the familial tendencies of, stop me if I'm overstating this, of being cluttered and just accumulating a bunch of stuff. I can't live like that. So that's all I said.
Right. Right. And I became pretty defensive.
Two things. You denied it, and then you blamed it back on me.
Right. I said I felt attacked, which I was just describing how I literally felt.
But saying I feel attacked mean it's an overreaction or an overstatement on my part, not owning that this is a reality.
Right.
And I didn't yell. It wasn't a hyperbolic accusation. So yeah, go ahead.
Right. So, but then while we were talking about it, here at the church, I have a little filing cabinet. And if you were to peek into that filing cabinet, it would horrify most people.
But in the books and your desk and what's under your desk, and I didn't call you are this. I said you have these tendencies.
Right.
That we need to mediate.
But it's hard to hear that and not hear you are this.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Which was Dave's perspective too.
Right. So then I got, I suppose, am defensive about it, and then want to justify it, while at the same time knowing full well that the file cabinet, at least here at church, that belongs to me, it does look like a hoarder file. Like if you open it, I've never watched the show, but I've heard that some hoarders, they get like storage units, and then they just buy more storage units and they never deal with the other.
So that's came up in the conversation, right?
Right.
Where I said that's what you tend to do is you'll put stuff in a place, and then when it's full, you don't go through it and sort it out. You just buy another filing
transfer.
cabinet.
Yeah. I've never bought I don't think I've ever bought a filing cabinet.
But you'll just go to a different drawer,
Right,
which was my
right.
point of the desk. That's why we need to clean it out, because there's some things I store in there too, and I've noticed your keepsakes that you like to have are just bleeding over into my side of the desk, and that's where I just wanted to both of us clean it out together. But I think it begs question, like, what do you do when a discussion hits a nerve in your spouse to where it's overly sensitive or overly accusatory, depending on which side you're looking at it from, and it just creates tension.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and we're still, I do think there's been some kind of resolution.
Where did we end?
I think we ended with an acknowledgement that is a tendency of mine, like it is, and that it's also a source of shame for me. So I obviously
Which I'd never heard you say that.
Yeah. Well, even like thinking about it, like when you said that you peeked in that filing cabinet, that was the immediate emotion was shame. It's like, oh, I don't want her looking at that. Now you know where all of our water guns are. So there is a point of shame, which helps me understand why I don't like talking about it, and even why I don't like. There's some shame even in acknowledging it, and then going through all that stuff, all my hoarder stuff. Like there's some shame in it. It's I think within the realm of function. Like it's not horrible, but it is something that exists within me, and yeah.
But me not knowing that there was shame there, it was just it wasn't. I just suggested we do an activity on your day off.
Right.
And the two options were like, you're completely denying the reality or it's my fault,
Right.
which it just isn't a productive way forward.
It isn't, but that's sort of an indicator
Yeah.
of okay, all of a sudden, sort of my world doesn't feel safe, and so
Right.
these little indicators, either being super defensive, evasive, withdrawal, I don't want to talk about it. I want to let's talk about something else. Which, looking back, I tried a couple of times to move the conversation into another area. Those are all sort of indicators of, okay, I don't feel safe right now, which
Yeah.
means there's some sort of deep-seated fear or shame that's being hit upon.
Yeah. So what's my takeaway? Because I do think it's okay to, like, what would you have me learn from our interaction?
Well, I think whenever you press on something, and you don't even know that you're pressing,
Right.
but whenever you notice those tendencies from me,
Right.
like
to
why
be
is
gentler.
why is David being evasive? Why is he like this? It wasn't even an emotional question,
Right.
and yet why is his voice getting higher and higher? Like he seems to be, which is saying something. And like those are indications of like, okay, there's an emotional there's an energy there that I've tapped into, and when fear and shame are involved, reason, logic aren't the primary drivers anymore.
Right.
So the expectation then is like, oh, it's not going to be reasonable. This is going to be emotionally driven. So I need to have some emotional deflators.
Right. So what could I have done to make it safer? Like what in that discussion, what could I have said or done to make it feel safer?
Well, I think part of it is what you did, which is why this seems to be uncomfortable. Why is this uncomfortable for you? Help me to understand where you're coming from on this. So then it gives me an opportunity to catch up with my emotions, because in the moment you actually don't know if you're being emotional. You're reacting, and you don't really know why you're being emotional. So sometimes people begin to yell, and it's like, hey, well, your voice, it has really increased in volume. And they're like, no, it hasn't. And it's like, well, you don't. So you asking that question gives me an opportunity to catch up with my emotion. And I go,
Right.
okay, I feel this way. I think ultimately because I actually feel some shame around this. And so it was a triggering event. So that gave me an opportunity to catch up with it and then be able to explain, this is why this is sensitive for me.
Thank you, audience, for being our therapist today.
Yes.
We
Yeah, go for it.
no. What were you saying?
No, I was going to transition. So,
Okay.
yeah.
We didn't get to, in the last episode, we didn't get to catch up. Not that this is really about us, but we had a couple of just like things we put pins in regarding the Cowan household.
Oh, yes.
Over the last
yes.
few weeks. And so just was going to give a real brief
Let's hear.
follow-up. The grace of God has manifest itself in our household, and we have air conditioning again.
Oh, yay.
And everybody
Wonderful.
is back to being mad for like normal reasons and not because we're just sweaty all the time.
Wunderbar.
Including the children. The children are great.
That's
but
awesome.
we had a number of things happen last week, though. So
Uh-oh.
we had
Household
good things.
related?
No, yeah, good. All like, I mean, so we're still in the middle of like doing full renovation and just hemorrhaging money, and the things that happen when you work on your house. It always costs more than you expect. So we're dealing with like that stress. But last week was also Saturday. Was our 11th anniversary.
Congratulations.
So again, we're just under 10 years or just over 10 years behind you guys. And thank you. And so we had that to look forward to, and it was great. Lovely conversation. We've gotten in the habit of we kind of recap the year and things we did well, things we didn't do well, things that like areas we've seen growth. and we just try to celebrate the time we have together, right? And so it was very good. Gorged ourselves at Sushi Den. Always a great time. The Monday preceding that, we dropped our, or I guess it was Tuesday technically. The Tuesday preceding that, we dropped our almost 6-year-old off at kindergarten for the first time.
Aww.
So it was a whole week. It was a whole week
that's
for
emotional.
us. Yeah, and so we did pretty well. All things considered, I would say we did good. Good, not great. A lot of texting back and forth throughout that day. He was great. He loves it. It's perfect. And then, and we're going to bounce back real quick from this, but then like just talking about the roller coaster, this coming Saturday will have been 2 years since we lost my little sister. And so we are all over the place.
All the feels.
All over the place. And part of it, and the reason I was bringing this up is like, it's interesting because last episode we talked about rhythms and not specifically to like hang on that subject, but talking about how like the further into marriage you get, the further set in your rhythms you get. And over time, sometimes those rhythms happen naturally, sometimes they're intentional, but what we're working on coming to terms with is for the rest of our lives, the week preceding Labor Day through Labor Day weekend is going to be probably the most up and down week of our entire year, every year until we die.
Yeah.
Because we're celebrating the high of marriage and
kids starting school,
whatever
new phase that ushers
all
in.
of that stuff, while also being like, and hey, a week into all of this stuff, you're just going to be reminded that like one of your best friends in the world is gone, and so it's like, it's really, we've been working through that this week and trying to figure out what that is going to look like for the rest of our lives.
That's
hard.
It's heavy.
So we've been a little volatile, and I think we've both done a great job of like having grace for one another. But it's a deal where it's like, mornings we wake up, it's a team effort with the kids because the boys both wake up at or before 6 if left to their own devices, especially the baby. And so like if my alarm goes off at 6:30 with Jacob's and he's out of bed at 6:30, but I'm again getting back to last week in Tish Warren's book, like if the first thing I do is get on my phone before I'm even out of bed, like immediately the moment Shell comes in there, even if my alarm has just gone off, she sees me on my phone, she's justifiably upset.
Yeah.
Because it's like, hey, we got 45 minutes to get everybody fed, dressed, packed, out the door, and you're sitting here trolling Twitter at 6:30 in the morning. Like, what are you doing? And to your point, Dave, like, I get defensive real quick because I'm like, I'm just waking up, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, but there's shame.
Yeah.
There's shame there. So anyway, so we've been working through all of this stuff so it's been a whole week. It's been a whole week for us. So, but we're getting through it. We're getting through it, and I'm glad to be here.
Cool.
I'm glad you're here.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing, man.
Yeah. So I get the surprise question today.
All right.
Okay. Dave just braced himself. You can't see it.
I'm ready for it.
My question could go either way, but often, in particular, around raising kids season, generally falls on the wife. But how do you handle? We've had seasons where marriage is about self-sacrifice, right? In different seasons, and there are seasons where one person self-sacrifices a lot more than another person, and then other seasons they're the recipient of their spouse self-sacrificing, right? But what do you do when it just feels lopsided? It feels like it's been a long stretch of self-sacrifice to the other's benefit. And like when there can be like resentment trickle in. And I mean, I feel like I think I'm thinking of this a lot as we're trying to figure out what work looks like for me in the next phase, or what, I have so many friends who are kind of starting second careers or doing something I've always wanted to do. And I've just been in this season for so long of keeping everything together and keeping Moreland Inc. running smoothly. And I'm still in that, but
Right.
we see on the horizon a different season.
Right.
Whereas, even professionally, things have kind of ticked along for you as you had hoped because I've been managing everything.
Right.
And so I guess my question for you is, how do you flip and help your spouse enter a season where they're not the only, like, exclusively self-sacrificing? And how do you coach people who are the one currently in that season that it's worth it and that it's beneficial, and to see the joy and benefit in it?
Yeah.
Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think there's kind of two different ways to answer it. One is that there is a trade-off that we've kind of talked about for you right now. Of right now you are sort of going all in with the kids and with Moreland Inc. The trade-off is professional.
Less time.
Yeah, I would say that professional sort of advancement. You're sacrificing that right now.
Right. And for a while, like, we've been in that season for a while.
Right. I would 5 years, or at a future episode we can talk about your work transition.
Yep.
But and yet that decision is at least partially influenced by advice we were given that if you invest in your kids now,
Right.
in this way, if you can, then you actually get that time back. On the flip side,
Right.
with the idea being that they're probably going to have more likelihood of thriving, autonomy, kind of a self-sustaining adulthood,
Right.
because you've invested that time into kind of preparing them for that
Right.
success. So then, as empty nesters, you have all kinds of time for professional advancement, and can kind of make up the time that you've sacrificed. Whereas this person who gave us this wisdom, he and a lot of his friends, they sacrificed that time with the kids for professional advancement, became empty nesters.
Where both parents fully, like, full tilt pursued things sort of to the exclusion sometimes of being present or whatever.
being present with
right,
the kids.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And then he noticed that his friends, when they were empty nesters, a lot of that time as empty nesters were actually dedicated towards their adult children,
Right.
who were having a failure to thrive.
Right.
And so, anyway, this was advice we got during our sabbatical 5 or 6 years ago. And so I think that's that definitely has influenced some of this trade-off
Absolutely.
mentality.
And was mutually agreed upon
Right.
that this
Right.
would be the arrangement. And I think it's more when and how do you help facilitate the opposite, or not the opposite, but when do you, is there a role for the spouse who has been able to kind of pursue what they want to pursue? And I don't know what that looks like. Like, to start to bolster the one who has been self-sacrificing. And, like, we're a few years away from this.
Right.
But it's just, I think I see that a lot with couples where either the wife or the husband, they just bear the brunt of home and child rearing, and choose that. And we've chosen that willingly, both of us. But then it does create sometimes resentment and difficulty on the flip side when you're trying to reemerge professionally.
Right. When the skills and abilities that would have been developed during that time period haven't been. And
Right,
so it's
right.
like, oh, now I'm in my, 50s and I
I'm
feel
starting
like I'm
over.
just starting over
Right.
without the tools available to me
Right.
to make a splash. So, yeah, I mean, I feel like that is it's a great question, and the immediate there's no easy answer to it, but I would say the way you find the answer is through honest dialogue
Right.
and through making clear what is it that you want out of your life. So I think having some kind of life goal, life vision, where it's like, what do I want to be sort of the said about me and my life? What do I want as a legacy? And kind of start with those big sort of vision questions and then reverse engineer it from there, rather than, well, all my friends seem to be having a thing. What's going to be my thing? Then we're sort of looking to the left and to the right.
Right.
And that's not a good sort of decision-making matrix.
Right.
Rather, okay, what do I want to be true? What's
Right.
most important, meaningful to me? Getting that clear, and then how do I get there?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think for us, and you actually, you asked this question of me a previous episode, in terms of like, what do you kind of see us doing when the kids are out of the house? Mm-hmm. And I actually didn't have a very good answer to it. So I feel like it would be with this particular question. I think part of the answer is to ask the question for you, like, what do I want? Like, what do you want to do? Like, what do you, where do you sort of anticipate feeling the most kind of value or purpose in your life in that stage?
Right. But there's lots of financial constraints too. I mean, as you're putting kids through college, it's not like I could do whatever I wanted to.
Right. Oh, they're all getting scholarships.
Oh, well, that's
There
good.
you
to
go.
know.
Super easy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, good to know.
I've already decided they're all going to get
Because
scholarships.
that factors into, I mean, people say that, like, what do you want to do? And it's like, well, I can't do anything
Right.
I want to do.
Want to work a job that will pay for my kids' education.
Okay. I think that's helpful.
Okay, that's
This
a great
is,
question.
just so everyone knows, this is an ongoing conversation we have that we have
Yes.
let you be privy to today.
Someone gave me the answer that we need to go see a life coach.
Life map, like a life map, right?
No, not a life map,
life
but a
coach?
life coach who will
Again, as the one who makes all the finances work, that's not an inexpensive endeavor, I'm sure.
I'm sure those thousands of dollars will be well spent.
Jesse's biting his tongue. All right. Moving on. This has been a serious episode.
what's up with that?
Sorry, guys. We'll get lighter in what's weird about us. But the question Dave's going to talk about today, and no, but seriously, was one I kind of queued up for him, just based on some relationships and friendships I have. What do you do when the person you married is very different than the person you're married to? And I think, kind of parsing it out a little bit, we all grow and change, right? Like when we got married, Dave wouldn't touch a tomato with a 10-foot pole, and now we have 10 tomato plants and eat tomatoes most meals
all the time.
So there are silly things or seemingly, and I quit clinical practice one day.
Suddenly.
Which after working in healthcare for 17 years, which that was different, right?
Right.
So you sort of had to grapple with a change in us and our financial situation. But there are times when it's a significant change where somebody, if you're a person of faith, that's such a foundational part of a relationship. And then one person, in fact, someone emailed us with that scenario after listening to one of the podcasts that her husband no longer believed in God, and they were trying to navigate that.
And that happens not all the time, but it seems to happen more during seasons like we're in right now culturally.
Yeah. Or if you're in a relationship and your spouse is now not attracted to your gender anymore. Like, is there, I guess what I want you to address is when is it worth sticking, like the title of this podcast is No Quitting the Home Team. When is the crux or the pivotal point where it is time to sort of part ways or separate?
Yeah, it's a great question, and that's a real kind of rubber meets the road question that a handful of couples are experiencing right now. The biblical parameters, I think, are important just to start off with. What made Jesus' teaching different from the Pharisaical teaching of his day was that he actually held up marriage in a significantly radical way, to where, it was actually pretty common within the Pharisaical tradition for divorces. Like, divorce was pretty common. There's no stats on it, obviously, 2,000 years ago. But there were a lot of reasons and outs for divorce. And not surprisingly, they almost always favored the husband, the man in the relationship. And so Jesus came and had a very distinct and different voice, upholding the value of covenant in marriage. Basically saying, when husband and wife, they are married, two becomes one. And then Jesus added, those whom God has put together, let no one separate. That's a distinct teaching of Jesus. So his belief was that covenant was permanent and only,
with no exceptions.
Yeah, only in very rare circumstances does divorce make sense. But his main point was that the very reason you make a covenant with someone is an assumption that you're going to change. That's the value of the covenant. You're going to change. In fact, I kind of changed the way I do pre-marriage counseling a few years ago to emphasize this point, that the person who you're making these vows to isn't just the person you're standing across from now in your wedding, but you're actually making this vow to a person who you have no idea who they are. But nevertheless, that's the value of the covenant. So it creates a kind of safety that allows for significant change in each other. Now, Jesus does give a couple of exceptions. If your spouse decides that they want to leave you, or they are having sex with someone who's not you, then that severs that covenant, and you can pursue divorce. Doesn't mean you have to get a divorce, but you can pursue divorce. So Jesus mentioned sexual infidelity as sort of a classic kind of cause that would prompt someone to head towards divorce, even if they're a follower of Jesus and really committed to marriage. And most people I know who've gotten divorced, most of them actually have a really high view of marriage. And oftentimes it's something like this that they had never foreseen for themselves or their marriage, and yet they find themselves divorced as a result. And the other one, and this is one that Paul brings up later in the New Testament, is this idea of abandonment. And then later, a kind of parallel idea of if one spouse becomes a Christian, in other words, a radical sort of altering of what they believe about God and reality, and if their spouse is okay with you becoming a Christian, then he says, by all means, remain married as much as it depends upon you. But then sort of the reverse of that is that if they don't want to stay married with you, then okay, that's sort of grounds for potentially for divorce. But he always put the emphasis on, for the Christian following Jesus, there's a really high priority on maintaining that covenant.
Mm-hmm.
So, for couples right now who find themselves in radically different places where they don't share even a common vision of reality, which some couples, that's where they're at. What do they do? Well, I would say the default is to press into hopefully reprioritize what the meaning of marriage actually is, which is marriage is actually designed to be a safe place for you to change and to become different kinds of people.
And still loved and
Still
commit in together in that.
Yes. The whole purpose of covenant is to be naked and unashamed. So the nakedness, which you read about this in Genesis 2, is really exposing a part of yourself with Adam and Eve, man and woman, picture of them naked. The point of raising up their nakedness is that they are different.
Mm-hmm.
And so the difference is expected, and yet to be different and unashamed, be naked and unashamed, that's the kind of relationship everyone wants anyways.
Yeah.
And so why not at least do your very best to try and have that kind of relationship with the spouse that you have?
Yeah.
There's all kinds of studies on this. Tim Keller brings up the point that that couples who are on the brink of divorce, who decide not to get divorced, the vast majority of them 5 years later are very happy they didn't get divorced.
Mm-hmm.
So statistically, it actually makes sense to hold off on getting divorced, because if you're changing, well, guess what? In 2, 3, 4 years, you may continue to change, and then you'll have weathered that storm together, and you'll be better for it as a result.
So we're not going to change the title of the podcast?
No. So my hope is that people would not quit the home team still.
Yeah.
And yet also acknowledging that there are rare occasions when divorce is necessary. And I would even say divorce is a grace. Again, it's rare. But there is a reason why those exceptions exist in Scripture. And marriage is not designed to be imprison someone in a torturous existence that violates the very nature of covenant. And Jesus knew about that, and Paul knew about that. Another thing about Paul, and I'll just end it here. Paul, the most prolific writer in the New Testament, there's a pretty high likelihood that before Paul became a Christian radically, that he was married, may very well have had kids. And a consequence of his radical conversion to Jesus was he was shunned by his community. We do know that happened. Paul continued to love his kinsmen according to the flesh, but he was also shunned by them as well. And there are actually a handful of indications that Paul was married, perhaps had kids, and that his wife, his family actually left him when he became a Christian. And so, and yet he afterwards, he just remained single. So we don't know that explicitly, but I, as a New Testament scholar, I'm pretty certain that he was, with that head on. Paul knows, I think, quite intimately what it feels like to have that kind of rip in his family. And has gone through that pain, which is why on the flip side, as a single man in the church, he so emphasizes the beauty of the family of God. Why he calls Timothy his son. Chances are he probably had a son, and yet had shunned him. And so Paul fully embraced the family of God. So while our emphasis on this podcast is no quitting the home team and maintaining that family, Scripture is quite radical in that it actually points to a deeper family that we get to be a part of, the family of God. So that if you're that person who finds
Themselves in
herself
that
in situation in divorce, it's not the end of the world for you. There's actually a family you can become, you're a part of the family of God. This is the beauty of church, where you can have siblings, kids, parents, and you can be part of that family. And so divorce isn't the end of the road for you.
That's lovely.
Yeah, and I've seen within family and friends and, just you live enough life, you tend to see examples of most of these play out. So divorces that were really messy and done out of impulse that were then regretted later, or marriages that in the end it was actually a grace that they ended.
Yep.
And you see beauty and growth and revitalization on the other side of that. People who threatened divorce for years and then down the road are deeply thankful they didn't, right? So it's interesting to see how that plays out, especially in relationships that, seem stable, seem super healthy, and then a lot of stuff comes to light. But all of this to say your point of like, you do change, and that is the beauty of covenant is like, I'm not only...
There's freedom to change.
Yeah,
There's
it's
freedom
like,
to
I'm not
change.
only making a covenant to the person you are now, I'm making a covenant to the person you are 50 years from now.
Right.
And as you said, Dave, there's safety in that, and it's freeing. It's unbelievably freeing.
Yes.
Totally agree.
So that's
Good stuff.
Great. Thank you.
All right, now let's talk about weirdness.
Okay.
I have to preface this, what's weird about us, with all of you who know Dave. Jesse, look at him right now. Know that there are few things in this world that we can have absolute certainty about. And the one thing that there is absolute certainty about in the world is that Dave Moreland will always get himself a warm beverage. It doesn't matter if your house is burning down, if he's late for a meeting, if a child is choking on a hot dog. Dave.
If you're sitting in a green room with the air conditioning turned off and high
Dave
humidity and heat,
will always get himself a warm beverage. So
I'll be there in just a minute. I just need to get my coffee.
the whole house isn't going to burn down. It'll be fine.
subsequently, we accumulated quite a few mugs, would you say?
Dozens of mugs.
Same.
And there came a point recently, what was it, a year ago?
About a year and a half ago. Continue.
Where I had a bit of a drastic declaration one day that I was tired of crappy mugs, and we would, from this moment on, only have nice mugs. And nice mugs meaning ones that feel good, have a good handle, are aesthetically pleasing to the eye, and the thickness of the mug feels good to drink out of. So we purged all of the crappy mugs.
I heard tell of the culling.
We culled the crappy mugs.
Yep. Some of those may have found their way to Fellowship Denver Church.
Don't worry about it.
Apologize. And since then, everywhere we go, Dave and I are a bit obsessed with finding fabulous mugs.
So, for Christmas,
Yep.
for our anniversary,
Yep.
for your birthday,
Yep.
for the past year, I've given you a really nice mug. So you're all not just a mug.
It's a
Merry,
work.
Merry
it's
Christmas. Here's a mug.
It's a work of art.
Yes, but I get you. But I'm always on the lookout now.
Yeah.
For fancy mugs. When we went on vacation,
We went to a art show in a vineyard in Northern California.
and found the
The
most
most beautiful. It's perfect.
handcrafted mug.
Yeah.
So anytime if you guys come over to our house,
And you share a warm beverage with Dave every 15 minutes.
not every 15 minutes.
It's closer to every 15 minutes than I think you want people to know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's true. It's true.
Dave said when we were talking about this, he said the people at Fellowship Denver are going to just be nodding. The staff. Is
Yeah, the
just gonna
staff,
be,
they all know this to be true.
just going to be nodding and
Especially the meeting started 3 minutes ago, and why is Dave slowly walking to get his coffee?
yeah.
I just need that first.
Yeah. So we have a mug obsession. That's a little weird.
Yeah. But it's kind of nice. It's kind of upgraded our life a little bit.
It has. It's gonna come to a stopping point though because we're running out of space.
We're out of
I
space.
was gonna say,
We're
at
out of
what
space,
point?
yeah.
At what point is it cyclical,
Yeah.
and you have to then, like, because I imagine even when you start this process of, we're only getting great mugs from here on out.
Mm-hmm.
10 years down the road, you've probably figured out and honed in on what you like even more so. And
Mm-hmm. Right.
so the mugs you got 10 years ago
I
are now
know.
like, it's fine, I guess.
Well, then our kids came home from this sweet summer camp they love with 3 Eagle Lake mugs.
Of course they did.
So you can't throw
It's
them.
everything I can do to keep Renee from throwing
And
this away.
I'm not going to throw them away. But
Well, they're
I'm
not
like,
your mugs.
They're not, but they don't drink. They don't drink out of them. Anyway. All right, honey, let's get some book recs real quick.
All right, let's
We've
do it.
gone long and heavy. Sorry, long and heavy today.
Well, good. Well, my book recommendation is about the end of apartheid.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
So,
That'll bring it
light.
back up. That'll
Yeah,
bring
yeah.
us
So
back
just
up.
essentially a comedy.
right. So, the book rec is No Future Without Forgiveness by Desmond Tutu. It's about the truth and reconciliation process of post-apartheid South Africa, about the process of forgiveness for an entire society who were impacted by apartheid, and as the title of the book suggests, Bishop Tutu says, in order to move forward as a society, we can't ignore evil that's been done, nor can we proceed towards a kind of vengeance either, if the goal is actually to be reconciled with one another. So there has to be an acknowledgement, repentance, restitution, and there has to be the gift of forgiveness. So No Future Without Forgiveness is really a depiction of a country that if we're going to have a future together, we have to give each other the gift of repentance or gift of forgiveness. And I love this book. I've just recently read it, and it's applicable obviously for marriages as well.
Right.
Because we sometimes intentionally, but often inadvertently, cause harm to each other.
Right.
And to be willing to admit when we've been wrong, and to make steps towards repentance, and to really offer real forgiveness. That's how you move forward in a marriage. And Renee, I've noticed this with us, that the people over the years who we've been able to interact with and do life with, what they like about our marriage isn't just that we do everything right, because we don't, But often what they like is this sort of capacity to forgive each other when we screw up and to move on. It's when we mess up, ironically, that's the attractive part, not when we do everything right.
Right, yeah. Okay, super quick because we are way over time today. I know, but coincidentally, I'm going to recommend a book on forgiveness as well, but it's fiction. And I'm not going to give you much about it. I just want you to read it, and it's beautiful. It's Maytrees by Annie Dillard, and it's an incredible portrait of what forgiveness looks like and the slow, hard work of letting go of anger and holding on to love. And it's beautiful. Maytrees by Annie Dillard. Bye,
Awesome.
guys.
Bye.
Thanks
See
for
you.
hanging with us.
You make known to me the path of life.